We come to the first statement on pensions, and I call the Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In November, I informed the House that the Government would make a new decision in response to the Parliamentary and Health Service Ombudsman's report into the way changes to the state pension age were communicated to women born in the 1950s. This followed relevant evidence coming to light as part of legal proceedings challenging the original decision announced by my predecessor in December 2024. We have now concluded the process to make a new decision and are placing copies of the Government's full response in the libraries of both Houses. Before I turn to the substance, I think it's important to be clear what this decision and statement is about and what it is not. There are legitimate and sincerely held views about whether it was wise to increase the state pension age. In particular, whether the decision taken in 2011 by the coalition government to accelerate equalisation and the rise to the age of 66 was the right thing to do or not. But the issue that we are discussing today is not about the merits or otherwise of past policy decisions on the state pension age. What the Ombudsman investigated was how changes to the state pension age were communicated and whether within a specific and narrow time period there was maladministration and injustice, and if so, whether it warrants compensation. In March 2024, the Ombudsman published their final report into this. And as with so many other issues, the previous government left the report on their desks, issued no response, took no decision and left it to this government to respond. In December 2024, the then Work and Pensions Secretary, my right honourable friend, the member for Leicester West, set out the government's response, having considered all the information provided to her. However, given relevant research from 2007 about the effectiveness of sending letters subsequently emerged that had not been provided to my right honourable friend, I wanted to ensure the right and proper process was followed to take account of this alongside information previously considered. And of course, I asked the Department not just to consider the 2007 report, but also to undertake new searches as part of an extensive review of relevant historical documents to help inform this new decision. Madam Deputy Speaker, we accept that individual letters about changes to the state pension age could have been sent earlier. For this, I want to repeat the apology that my right honourable friend gave on behalf of the Government, and I am sorry that those letters were not sent sooner. We also agree with the Ombudsman that women did not suffer any direct financial loss from the delay. However, the question is about the impact of the delay in sending these letters. The evidence taken as a whole, including from 2007, suggests the majority of 1950s-born women would not have read and recalled the contents of an unsolicited pensions letter, even if it had been sent earlier. Furthermore, the evidence also suggests that those less knowledgeable about pensions, the very women who most needed to engage with a letter and where it might have made a difference, were the least likely to read it. So an earlier letter would have been unlikely to make a difference to what the majority of women knew about their own state pension age. Indeed, the 2007 report concluded automatic pension forecast letters only had a negligible impact on pension knowledge and planning, and the Department stopped sending them. The evidence shows that the vast majority of 1950s-born women already knew the state pension age was increasing, thanks to a wide range of public information, including through leaflets, education campaigns, information in GP surgeries, on TV, radio, cinema and online. To specifically compensate only those women who suffered injustice would require a scheme that could reliably verify the individual circumstances of millions of women. That includes whether someone genuinely didn't know their state pension age was changing and whether they would have read and remembered a letter from many years ago and acted differently. It would not be practical to set up a compensation scheme to assess conclusively the answers to these questions. As for a flat rate scheme, that would cost up to £10.3 billion and would simply not be right or fair, given it would be paid to the vast majority who were aware of the changes. I've heard calls for compensation aimed at lower income pensioners, and we have focused in the last 12 months on raising pension credit uptake. But in the context of this decision, a scheme focused on any single income group still doesn't specify who may or may not have suffered injustice. And that is why, Madam Deputy Speaker, in taking this new decision, the Government has come to the same conclusion on compensation as my right honourable friend, the previous Secretary of State, announced in December 2024. I know that many people feel the state pension age should not have gone up in the way that it did. Indeed, Labour argued against the 2011 policy decision put in place by the Conservative Lib Dem coalition that accelerated the increase. But I repeat what I said at the start of my statement. This is a different issue to the one the Ombudsman investigated and that we are responding to today, which relates to the communication of changes in the state pension age and narrowly to a delay in sending letters over a relatively short period. The changes from 2011 underline the importance that decisions on the state pension age carry and the impact they have on people's lives. I take seriously the need to weigh carefully any future changes. That is why, with the Ombudsman, the Department has been developing an action plan for the future. Work on that stopped pending today's new decision, and I can confirm that it will now resume. This also underlines why we are determined to ensure that all pensioners on lower incomes, the majority of whom are women, have a better life in retirement, just as Labour has done in the past. From the Wilson government, that first formally linked the uprating of pensions to the higher of earnings or prices, to the last Labour government that lifted 1 million pensioners out of poverty. We introduced pension credit, which is vital in topping up the incomes of the poorest pensioners, with women consistently making up the majority of those benefiting since we introduced it in 2003. And we are ensuring that more pensioners get that extra income, with the biggest ever campaign to increase take-up. This saw tens of thousands of more awards to the pension credit in the year up to November compared to the previous year. In addition, our commitment to the triple lock for this Parliament means that women will see their state pension rise by up to £575 this year, with incomes up to £2,100 a year higher by the end of the Parliament. Indeed, overall spending on the state pension is set to be over £30 billion a year higher by the end of this Parliament compared to 2024-25. And we're putting record investment into the NHS, meaning thousands more pensioners are getting the operations and treatment that they need rather than being left in pain on waiting lists. That is the positive difference that this government is making. Madam Deputy Speaker, I believe it was right to review the evidence, and that having done so, we've made the right decision based on due process and the body of evidence. And at the same time, looking to the future, we are taking important steps to support women in retirement and help them to build a better life for themselves and their families, and I commend this statement to the House.
I call the Shadow Minister, Mark Garnier.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. So as constituency MPs, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will all have met many people, many campaigners from the Women Against State Pension Inequality campaign group, the WASPI Women. I'm sure that many members of this House will have received a large amount of correspondence on this recently, and if they're anything like me, where I've had 150 emails recently about this, they will really feel the strength of opinion there is out there on this thing. But it is safe to say that both our constituents and as members of Parliament, we have been left wanting by this government. In December 2024, the previous Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Member for Leicester West, told this House that the government would not compensate these women. Let me remind colleagues what her rationale was, and I quote, "The government do not believe that paying a flat rate to all women at a cost of up to £10.5 billion would be a fair or proportionate use of taxpayers' money. She tried to also argue that they couldn't afford it because of holes in the government finances. But as my right honourable friend, the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, rightfully said, the government compensation should always be based on what is fair and just. So before getting into government, it seemed that Labour MPs did think that an injustice had been done. And let us remind our colleagues of what members of this government have said in the past. The Prime Minister himself called this situation a huge injustice. The Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary slammed the cliff edge, he said, that faced WASPy women. The Foreign Secretary said she was fighting for a fair deal for the WASPy women. The Chancellor of the Exchequer claimed to want justice for WASPy women. Even the current Secretary of State, Madam Deputy Speaker, got in on the action, where he put out a social media post with the caption, "Members of Parliament campaigning for a better deal for WASPy women." Is it no wonder, therefore, that the WASPy women who were promised so much are so angry? The people who used to stand beside them have now turned against them. If the government really believed that these women had faced a great injustice, they would have found a way to compensate them. They could have avoided a deal with Mauritius that will cost us all £35 billion. But they chose not to. They could have found savings on our country's benefit bill, but they chose not to. They had 14 years to prepare for government and are messing up by doing nothing. And that brings us to the statement from the Secretary of State today. Isn't it convenient, Madam Deputy Speaker, that he should choose a sitting day when most MPs are not here? It's almost as if they don't want to hear the criticism from his own backbenchers. In reality, all the Secretary of State is doing is announcing that nothing has changed and that they won't be compensating WASPy women. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, I have a few questions. Given he previously campaigned for a better deal for WASPy women, does he think that today's announcement provides that better deal? Secondly, in his statement, the Secretary of State tries to argue that this is somehow our fault on this side of the chamber. However, he forgets that the maladministration, which the previous Secretary of State apologised for, was committed under the last Labour government before 2010. This is something that the Ombudsman report made explicitly clear. So can the Secretary of State just hold his hands up and take accountability for these mistakes? Thirdly, and this is a really interesting point, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Secretary of State chose to mention the triple lock in his statement, and he chose to say that the state pension would go up by up to £575 this year, with an expected income rises by up to £2,100 a year by the end of this Parliament. Now, we all know there's no cap on the triple lock. There's no cap on the triple lock. But he makes a point where he says it will go by up to 2,100. So is he implying that the triple lock is about to be capped? Can he confirm that he's apparently U-turning on their policy on the triple lock by imposing a cap? And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, isn't it now just fact that this government resemble, frankly, a bunch of joyriders pulling handbrake turns in a Tesco car park when they should be a serious party of government? Their backbenchers keep being marched up the hill only to be told to march down again. They even take the whip away from them for having a conscience, only to be told later that ministers are proud to support policies that were only recently sackable offences. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, does he really think this constant back and forth is fair on WASPy women? I look forward to his comments.
The honourable gentleman's response. He's right that there's been a forceful and an energetic campaign which has resulted in lots of emails and contact with members right across the House. But his government had this report from the Ombudsman. They could have taken a decision before the election. They chose not to, as with so many other issues. And perhaps the Ombudsman had an inkling of how unlikely it would be to get a decision from the government, because the Ombudsman of the time made the recommendations on remedy to Parliament rather than to his government. Now, he refers to Labour, to me, to other MPs on this side of the House. I remind him, we did vote against the acceleration in the rise to the state pension age that was put through by the coalition government. In terms of the re-examination of the decision, I thought it was right to do. to make absolutely sure that we got this right, considering not just the 2007 report, but a whole range of evidence and documents. I have repeated the apology given by my predecessor for the maladministration that the Ombudsman found. And as for his comments on the triple lock, there is no change in our position, and the figures quoted reflect the estimates of the OBR throughout the Parliament.
I'll now call Barry Gardiner, followed by Steve Darling. Barry Gardiner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure my right honourable friend will appreciate the enormous disappointment on this side of the House. Only 2 years before the general election, our now Prime Minister spoke in favour of a just settlement for WASPI women. I acknowledge what he said, that this was not contained in our manifesto. We did not make that promise in the manifesto, and it's a manifesto that we all stood on. But he will recognise that there is a real sense of injustice that has been done to those women, and today has not remediated that.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question, and I understand what he says, but it's important to also consider exactly what is at issue here in the statement. There are many people who are unhappy with the rise in the state pension age and the decision to equalise it. And this decision does not deal with that. It deals with a specific issue of how this was communicated over a specific period of time. And it's really important in this to separate these two things. I believe on that grounds we have considered this very carefully, not just once, but twice now, and given this due and proper process. It is right to apologise for the maladministration, but I believe that the decision that we've taken on remedy and compensation is also the correct one.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Steve Darling.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I must say I met a few weeks ago with the Secretary of State where we reflected on him being a fan of Celtic and Bruce Springsteen, but I wasn't aware that he was also a member of the Magic Circle, because clearly he's trying to set up a number of illusions around us of issues that this is to do with and comments, when actually it is all about whether these women were communicated adequately. And I would reflect on what my right honourable colleagues was stating just now. It's about injustice. And when you get elected as an MP and you're somewhat disappointed as a Liberal Democrat not to be a member of the government, that actually it is about seeking out injustice and tackling this. And yet the Secretary of State is putting this in the too hard to do file. There are more than 3.6 million WASPI women across the UK who will feel this as if it were a punch in the stomach. They will feel utterly betrayed, and they will feel betrayed because false hope was given to them in the autumn, and so that hope has been dashed. I'd like to thank the more than 100 MPs from across the United Kingdom who supported the letter I coordinated calling for justice for WASPI women, but sadly this fell on stony ground. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State, what engagement did he have with the Ombudsman before coming to his final conclusions around this? And also, can he please explain further why he has chosen to ignore the recommendation of the Ombudsman to give justice to WASPI women and pay compensation?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. He's certainly right about Celtic and Bruce Springsteen and my allegiance to both. But there is no illusion about the position of his party. He says with a tinge of regret that he wishes they were in government, but they were in government, and that's the point. Yeah. And in 2011, they took the decision to accelerate the equalisation and the raising of the state pension age. So they were in government and were in the position of being able to take these decisions. The heart of this is something different. It is about how these decisions were communicated and whether people really could have done something differently. Now, he asks about engagement with the Ombudsman. I, of course, have looked at their report. The current Ombudsman recently met the Permanent Secretary, and in terms of future work, as I said in my statement, we will pick up the work that was paused on the action plan so that in future, when we're considering the state pension age, we not only consider policy, but fully consider all the aspects of communication and the period of warning, things that were distinctly not done when that decision to accelerate the state pension age happened under his government in the coalition.
Dame Onwurah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State knows just how disappointing so many will find this statement. For the WASPI women who feel so strongly the injustice they have suffered. And he has set out the reasons in principle and in practice, and I appreciate that, and how the Labour government will support low-income pensioners. But I want to talk about the personal. I suspect the Secretary of State, like me and many in this House, started full-time work in his 20s, and it was not physically arduous. I think of my constituent who started work at 15, hard physical work, and found herself required to continue working many years after she expected to be retired and as her health deteriorated. What help and support can the Secretary of State offer her?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend, and I'd say two things in response to the issue she raises. It is right that as the state pension age has gone up, how that affects people will be influenced by the kind of lives that they've led, the toughness of the work that they've done. But I say to her, that's an argument about the raising of the state pension age. And while I appreciate a lot of the correspondence has been about that, it is a different issue from the one that the Ombudsman was looking at. And in terms of how we look after pensioners and what our policy is, that's exactly why we have pension credit to help lower income pensioners. It's why we put it in place in 2003 and why we've put extra effort into making sure that entitlement to that benefit is taken up by those who could have access to it.
Mark Pritchard.
The Secretary of State is a fellow West Midlands Member of Parliament, and you will know Shropshire very well. And can I just say that many of my constituents born in the 1950s, WASPI women, will be very, very disappointed by today's announcement. He talks about miscommunication, maladministration, says little about compensation, of course, which means the injustice continues. He mentions an action plan. Could you give a little bit more detail on how the action plan will contribute towards assuaging some of the anger as a result, no doubt, of this non-announcement today and disappointing announcement, and what real help can be given to WASPI women in different ways, including those that aren't entitled or qualify for pension credit?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my West Midlands colleague for his question. He talks about disappointment. I mean, his frontbench spokesperson could have, in the time allocated to him, have promised to take a different decision were the party opposite ever to return to power. And they had a chance to take a different decision when they were in power, but chose not even to respond to the report, let alone to outline what that decision might be. He asks about the action plan and specifically what it will cover. Two things at the heart of it: communications and the handling of complaints. If we are raising the state pension age over time in the country, it's important that we get the communications right. That's what we want to do in our work with the Ombudsman going forward.
John Trickett.
Thank you very much. And on the position of the WASPI women, there are 300,000 in Yorkshire and 6,500 in my constituency. And in Yorkshire, we believe politicians should say what they mean and mean what they say. And Labour opposed this proposal when it was first introduced. And our leading spokesman continued to say they wanted to and would deliver justice to the WASPI women. This is not justice today. And for many, many women in my constituency and elsewhere who I've met and discussed, the idea that there will be an accelerated process of getting to a higher pension age came like a bolt out of the blue. They had no idea this was coming so quickly. It disrupted families' plans, financial structures of their lives, and it was a disgrace introduced by the parties opposite. But the government still has a chance to put this right. And I say this to the Minister, he hasn't heard the end of this problem or of the voice of the WASPI women either.
Secretary of State.
I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right to remind the House that we opposed the acceleration, we voted against it, and we opposed many policies of the coalition government and the Tory governments that were in power over the last 14 years. He's also right to say that 5 years' notice was not enough, and that's why we opposed it in the vote. In terms of our responsibilities now, that is why we've put such a stress on looking after pensions properly, maintaining the value of the basic state pension. I outlined what that would mean for this Parliament in the statement that I gave, and for poorer pensioners, making sure pension credit is there and making sure that the maximum take-up of that benefit is there so that people can get access to the benefits to which they are entitled.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Government's apology for the maladministration and the clarity today, but many Salisbury WASPI women will be very disappointed by the decision. I'm just wondering if the Secretary of State could say a little bit more about what options did he look at to compensate the most vulnerable, the poorest of the WASPI women, because I recognise the enormous cost would be too much overall, but what options did he pursue? When I was in government, the option to withdraw the winter fuel payment was one that I resisted because of the impracticalities of doing so fairly. What options were put to him, and couldn't he have compensated the poorest, as I think many would have been sympathetic to?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I have great respect for the Right Honourable Member, and he will have considered some of these issues in government because, of course, he had long service as a Treasury Minister. I like the Honourable Gentleman a lot, but I have to say he could have taken decisions on this when his party were in power. In terms of the lowest income pensioners, I make 2 points. The first point is to repeat what I said in my statement, which is that the problem with any flat rate scheme is it would compensate people who knew about the state pension age rising, as well as maybe those who didn't. And for lower income pensioners, that is precisely why we have pension credit, so that there is access to another benefit for pensioners who are living on particularly low incomes. We introduced pension credit back in 2003, and since we came back into office in 2024, we've put extra effort into making sure that it's taken up, which has resulted in tens of thousands of additional pensioners having access to pension credit.
Liz Twist.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I have to say, I suppose I should declare an interest as a 1950s born woman. So I do that. And I must say that this is a disappointing statement, and I can only associate myself with the remarks made by my honourable friend, the member for Brent West, which we don't always do, but I do. And I want to take the opportunity to thank all the WASPI women who have been campaigning so hard and working so hard on this issue with many of us. And the question, I suppose, is how has this been communicated to the WASPI group?
Secretary of State.
Well, I thank my honourable friend, and I agree with her that the WASPI women have, as I said, run an energetic, sustained campaign that has made a big impact on members, and you can see that from the questions that are asked in the House today. In terms of the communication, as soon as it became clear to me that there was relevant evidence which had not been shown to my predecessor, I made a decision to retake this decision, looking not just at that, but at a wider body of evidence. I came to the House in November, informed the House I was going to do that, and told Mr. Speaker and the House that when I had gone through the process and reached a conclusion to that process, I would come back at the earliest opportunity and announce those conclusions to the House, and that's exactly what I'm doing today.
Tessa Muns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Ombudsman's ruling in March recommended that some women should get a payout and an apology. Now the Waspy women in my constituency have another apology, but they've not received a penny in compensation for the maladministration found by the Ombudsman. So why has the government chosen to accept one half of the recommendations, and if I may say, I think it's probably the easy half, but not the other, which at literally £1,000 to £2,950 for each woman is hardly a high cost for justice in the grand scheme of government funding considerations?
I thank her for her question. As I say, we do accept the finding on maladministration, but in terms of this issue of what difference earlier communications would have made, particularly to those who knew the least about the increase in their state pension age, taking all the survey evidence in the round, it suggests that a majority of women knew the state pension age was increasing. Now, she asks about the up to £10 billion that it would cost for a compensation scheme and minimises the cost of that. And I don't want to be excessively partisan today, but I do have to say that it is the easiest thing to come in here every day and call for billions for this and billions for that, and then oppose all the revenue-raising measures that have to be put through in any budget. This is not a situation where we should do that and simply add to the pattern of doing that. It is a substantial amount of money, and if we were to go down that road, we would end up compensating a significant number of women who knew that their state pension age was increasing and to whom there has been no injustice.
Mary Glendon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Minister stated that the evidence shows that the vast majority of 1950s born women already knew the state pension age was increasing. I was also a 1950s born woman, like my honourable friend. Does the Minister honestly think there would have been such a massive campaign over all these years by Waspy women and their supporters if they believed this was true and did know about their pensions? And in particular, the 1954 women who were treated so unjustly by the coalition government, surely the Minister believes they do deserve compensation for that terrible shock they received back in 2011.
I thank her for her question. In terms of the evidence I've considered, there is a decision document which has been placed in the Library of the House, which sets all that out, together with various surveys, all of which are in the public domain, that were considered in the course of me reaching this decision. I think the campaign is understandable because of the steep acceleration that was legislated for by the coalition government. Now, we opposed that at the time, and the lesson for the future is to give good notice and predictability in rises in the state pension age, and that is at the absolute heart of the action plan that we are working with on the Ombudsman for the future.
Kirsty Blackman.
Its colleagues also stood with Waspy women, holding boards that say we support the Waspy women, holding boards that say we support compensation for the Waspy women. The Minister is standing there holding his hands up saying, I'm very sorry that the previous administration forgot to send out a letter, but we're not going to do anything about it because it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. Has he listened to the voices of Waspy women who've come to every single one of us and said, I didn't get that letter. I did not know that the state pension age was increasing, and I found myself, like one of the backbenchers over there said, I found myself having to work far longer in a physical job than I ever expected to because I wasn't given the notice. Is this the change that the Labour government promised when they came in last year?
Yeah.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I will defend to the hill our protection of the state pension. Our increases in the state pension, which as I said, are £575 for the new state pension from April, and our extra help for poorer pensioners. There was a wide range of communications about this. Letters are one part of that, but they're not the only part of that. And when you take into account the survey evidence as a whole, most people knew the state pension age was increasing. Like I said to the previous questioner from the Liberal Democrats, if she wants to pledge compensation in some way, she's entitled to do that. But we have looked at the evidence in the round. I repeat the apology for the maladministration, but I think that we've reached the right decision today.
Patricia Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank my right honourable friend for his statement this morning. My right honourable friend is a very serious individual, and his statement today was very serious, but it helpfully enumerated that the majority of pensioners on lower incomes are women, and that women make up the majority of those depending on pension credit. So the anger that WASPI women feel about this steep increase in age is very understandable. And many of these women paid what my mother used to call the small stamp, which makes their situation even more vulnerable. However, I accept that the Minister's statement is largely about the Ombudsman's decision. So can he indicate today what conversations he's had with the Ombudsman, specifically about why he made that recommendation? And also can he tell the Chamber what communication he's had with the WASPI women about his decision?
Secretary of State.
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we are often encouraged to make our statements to Parliament first, and that is what I've done, because when I came in November to announce that I was retaking the decision, I made that statement to Parliament first, and made a pledge that day that when I'd reached a conclusion, I would come back to announce it in Parliament first, and that is, I think, the right way to communicate this. She talks about women who paid, as she referred to, the small stamp. That is right, and that's why we've moved away from the old system to the new state pension for the future, and for the majority of pensioners on lower income. I stress again the importance of pension credit and our efforts to make sure that those pensioners entitled to it, the majority of whom are women, take advantage of their entitlement, make the application. That's what it's there for. It's there to help lower income pensioners.
Rachel Gilmore.
I have thousands of WASPI women in my constituency, which is already a very deprived constituency. I cannot express how angry they feel and how disappointed they feel today, and I am afraid I am going to have to use strong language. This is simply gaslighting by this Labour government. They know full well it wasn't about whether the letters were sent earlier, it is whether they were sent at all. Doesn't the Minister really need to accept that point?
Secretary of State.
I think it's right to focus on exactly what this is about and what it's not. The acceleration of the state pension age was something that we opposed. What the Ombudsman looked at was the specific issue of when letters were sent over a specific time period. So I feel I've been accurate in the statement that I've made today. And in the future, the lesson, if we go back to the 2011 decision, should be that increases in the state pension age should be announced in good time so that people have the chance to prepare. That's a policy decision. It is not the decision that the Ombudsman specifically examined with regard to communication.
Melanie on.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. This government has rightly taken action in situations relating to Hillsborough victims, the coal miners' pension scheme, some postmasters in the post office scandal as well. And yet this situation really does seem to have been put in the too hard to deal with box. Why does he think that these women should accept this outcome? And why does he think it always is women who seem to get such a rough end of the deal?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, The equalisation of the state pension age, I know, has produced quite a lot of opposition. I think the 2011 decision was too quick. That's why we opposed it at the time. But on the issue of compensation, to which she really refers, if we were to do this for everyone affected, we would end up, or everyone in this age group, we would end up compensating a significant number of people who knew that their state pension age was increasing. We don't think that would be the right and fair thing to do, and that's why we've reached the conclusion that I've announced today.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Secretary of State, I must register my deep concerns on behalf of the 5,000 WASPI women in my constituency. Whether it's the Ombudsman's report and hiding behind that report as a way of saying no, we can't help the WASPI woman. I know the WASPI woman back home would speak to me every week and always ask me about this particular subject, or ask me again, Jim, what's happening now? Where are we? Unfortunately, those vulnerable section of those most vulnerable, elderly, disabled, people who have waited all this time have nothing. So I need to put that on record. I can also say, Secretary of State, that for some who listen to the cases as the Secretary of State put forward, will ask the question, what does that actually mean? How does that? So I suppose my question will also be, Secretary of State, I think the WASPI woman will need some explanation, and is there some way of letting them know? And at the end, the last point that the Secretary of State made, and it's how the pension uplift, about pension credit, and about how they can help. Can I suggest one other way that perhaps maybe government can help them people? It won't be in any way a fallback case, but it would be something maybe when it comes to self-assessment and letters. Those who are WASPI, those who are over a certain age, find it incredibly hard to go online and create the whole system, and there has to be some methodology whereby those elderly people will know every penny they get in for their use will not be lost in the tax beforehand. There must be a methodology rather than going online, which elderly people can't do. There must be a system.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I remind the House that by the end of this Parliament, due to our commitment to increasing the basic state pension, we will be spending an estimated £30 billion a year more on the state pension. That is a testament to our commitment to maintaining the value of the basic state pension and making sure that people have a good and decent retirement. And that, of course, is for his constituents as much as any other member's constituents. In terms of the full reasoning behind the decision, there is a full decision document which I've deposited in the library of the House today, which is available to him. And in terms of online and face-to-face, he's right that for this service and any other service, it's important when people are accessing a benefit that they have a range of channels through which they can do that, so that people don't lose out for the reasons that he suggested.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement today and the repeated apology on behalf of the government. But like many members on these benches and across the House, I've long supported WASPI women in West Lothian and in Falkirk, and may I commend them for their perseverance over many, many years. I've spoken to several women who've experienced significant financial hardship and emotional and physical strain, and I share their undoubted disappointment today. But can I ask if he's considered the impact of this decision on the perception and indeed the efficacy of the role of the Ombudsman, which recommended that compensation be paid?
I'm grateful to her for her question. In terms of the role of the Ombudsman, we do take the role of the Ombudsman very seriously. The report was fully and very properly considered, but decisions on a compensation scheme of this scale will always in the end be for ministers and government to take, and I think that's the right and understandable approach.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've got no doubt that my 6,000 Western Berkshire WASPy women will be very angry with this decision, but can I ask the Secretary of State, will today's announcement mean that the legal proceedings challenging the Government's original decision, will they now continue? And what plans do we have to sit down, if any, to sit down, get round the table and try to avoid legal proceedings?
Secretary of State.
Madam Deputy Speaker, legal proceedings, initiation or otherwise, won't be a decision for me, and I can't predict what would happen in terms of future legal proceedings. That is a decision for others. My responsibility is to set out the decision in the proper way to Parliament, and I believe that in the statement I gave in November and the one that I've given today, I've done that and given the House the reasons for that.
Samantha Niblett.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In my constituency of South Derbyshire, I have about 5,400 women affected by this. Not all of them know. My own mum sort of shrugged her shoulders and went, oh, OK. But there are some women who do know, and they'll be listening today really disappointed. I was very proud to put my name and campaign for the brilliant support that government offered to MPS and BCSSS, hundreds of beneficiaries in my constituency. But this does look like we're letting women of a certain age down, women who were so frequently on the back foot, and the message really does sound like it's a little bit too a little bit too tricky to address. And whilst I acknowledge that 10.3 billion as a flat rate might be not the right thing to do, is there not something we can do to acknowledge the campaigning of these women that we supported for so many years?
Secretary of State.
I thank her for her question, and I mentioned the difficulties of a flat rate scheme. But an individual scheme also would face great practical difficulties, which I set out in my statement, in terms of ascertaining in each individual case who did or didn't get a letter, who can remember getting the letter, what they would have done differently, and so on. It is a great practical difficulty to do that, as well as the difficulties of a flat rate scheme.
Point of order.
John MacDonald. Point of order.
Madam Deputy Speaker, this is an extremely significant matter to be announced on a Thursday when the House is usually light in its attendance, and also with limited notice, and also with a very detailed document lodged in the House of Commons library. I'd ask, Madam Deputy Speaker, whether, through your officers, liaising with the Treasury front bench, that time can be found over the next fortnight, that there is a full opportunity for a full and comprehensive debate on this particular issue, because I know when I get back to my constituents, there'll be very many very angry people who feel they've been let down, if not betrayed, and I think members need the opportunity to be able to come back here and reflect the concerns of their constituents.
Yeah. I thank the honourable gentleman, right honourable gentleman, for his point of order. The timing of a statement is a matter for the government. However, the Treasury benches will have heard his point of order, and there is also the avenue open to the right honourable gentleman of applying for a backbench business debate. Thank you. That concludes the statement.